Well, hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on episode 10 of Dororo. And I'll be honest, the last few episodes have been really nice. Palate cleansing, 7, 8, and 9 were just like, okay, we suffered a lot with episode 6. And then I say that, and then episode 9 comes along, and it's my favorite of the series so far, as we get Dororo's backstory. Find out Dororo's a girl. But that shouldn't matter because Dororo is Dororo and has Hyakimaru as their Aniki, their brother, to watch over them. But speaking of brothers, I feel like when we ended the last episode with Tahomaru overhearing Daigo questioning Hyakimaru and being like, what the fudge? I feel like we're going to need some focus on him at some point. I don't know if we're going to get that soon or what's going to happen with that, but I feel like it's coming. It needs to happen. But I do have a comment from Anime Annie that I want to talk about before we start because it just seems fitting as we go into this episode that we bring it up. So Anime Annie was talking about with episode 6, this is their comment for that episode, saying it is great that Tahomaru, speaking of which, has Hyogo and Mutsu, who are two of their aides, the ones that are following him, to keep him from being more like Daigo and more of an entitled brat. I feel like this shows that while he got his looks from his father, he does have parts of him that are more like his mother. That gives me a lot of hope because I know the OP shows Hyakimaru and Tahomaru fighting, but I feel like, you know how the series is going to go. There's going to be misunderstandings and miscommunication because of course there will be. We wouldn't have a story otherwise. They're not just going to walk up and be like, hey, you want to talk about this? Sure. That's not going to happen because Hyakimaru doesn't speak except for like 2 words. And Tahomaru is going to be visibly frustrated, I'm sure, because he's not going to exactly know what to do with this information. So, but that does give me hope. I agree with Anime Annie that Tahomaru will not stray the path that Daigo has and might turn out better. That's the hope anyway. Anime Annie also says it is an interesting mirror of Hyakimaru and Tahomaru's personalities that even though they've been completely different in terms of upbringings, both have a childish streak and can be on the stubborn side. Though I'd say that Hyakimaru is more stubborn of the two, as Tahomaru at least has backed down in this episode. And that hit me. I was like, oh my god, yeah, they're both so stubborn. And Biwamaru even pointed out in episode 6 to the point of like, Hyakimaru was very childishly stubborn. Like just sitting there throwing those rocks with the Saru episode and doing all that. Like, Hyakimaru is very stubborn to the point where he hurts himself. Physically. And I feel like Tahomaru can be stubborn to the point where he can mentally hurt himself. So there's that parallel there. But these two stubborn boys, I could see why in the OP, if they get together, they might fight because they're siblings. Of course they would. So we'll just have to see about that. My brother and I are both Tauruses. So I kind of get that. We're both on the Taurus sign. And I do ascribe a little bit to the horoscope, the astrology, that we're both very stubborn. We're both very set in our ways. And once we decide something, we're very, very like, we'll butt heads. So growing up, the two of us both being that same mentality, we're oil and water in so many things in terms of our personality. My brother is super introverted. I can be extroverted. But we're both very, very different in terms of our talkativeness and what we like and our interests. But we do have some common ground and we do get very set in our ways. So growing up, we were very much like butting heads all the time. So I get that. If Hyakimaru and Tahomaru have some lingering sibling issues, I can understand that. They also noted, Anime Annie said, that the seiyuu for this episode that you will have heard before, Tahomaru is voiced by Chiba Shoya, who has also voiced Surin from Banana Fish, Sigma from Bungo Stray Dogs, which I was like, ooh, a Shinai from 86, nice, and Imamura from Blue Lock. And I was like, oh, how cool. And then the voice actor for Mutsu is also the narrator and Thors in Vinland Saga, among other series. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. So yeah, so thank you, Anime Annie, for giving that information. That's really cool. I'm glad to note that. But yeah, I'm super excited, y'all, to dive into this episode and see what we get. I'm watching this through Amazon Prime, and I didn't pay extra for the ads to be removed. Womp womp. So there are going to be 2 ads, it looks like, that pop up throughout this, but I will just edit them out. But I'm seeing them. Used to be that there'd be an ad at the beginning, and then it would show me the whole episode. Well, of course we can't have nice things. Anyway, we're going to sit here and we're going to start episode 10 of Dororo. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And I'll see you all on the other side. Well, let me tell you, friends, I walked into this series the moment we met Tahomaru and thought he's gonna be a slimy, bratty brother, the Scar to Hyakkimaru's Mufasa, and I have been pleasantly surprised. This is what's gonna be so hard. I really like Tahomaru's character. I really like his character. And I'm afraid that one of two things are going to happen. Either one, he's going to end up going through some life event, like he's going to lose Hyogo and Mutsu, his two allies and best friends, and Hyakkimaru is going to be involved in him losing them, and that's going to completely tarnish his personality and make him into a more antagonistic character. Or 2, there's going to be a bunch of bullshit misunderstanding that's going to pit these two against each other, and then it's just going to be ridiculous. So I'm like, why can't we just sit down and talk and have nice things? But then the series would be like 12 episodes, and that'd be the end of it. It would be twice as long. So, but I really liked Tahomaru's character in this. There are some red flags about his character that I'm a little worried about, but we'll talk about them through this episode. But yeah, one thing I kind of like is that this series has like kind of a flavor of the weak villain-esque nature with the demons. And like I've said before in previous episodes, I feel like that has to do with the way that Tezuka wrote the manga and the way that they adapted it in the 1969 version. Because if you've ever read any of Tezuka's other works, like I think of Astro Boy, I think of Unico, they do kind of have like, I mean, there's a thread, there's characters that you follow along that do things, but it's very reminiscent of kind of like, I think of old Western comics, and I'm sure that Tezuka and Eastern comics are the same, but it has a very like comic book format where it's like each week is a different adventure, each week has a different antagonist, and each week your characters go fight the monsters and we learn a little bit more about them. Nothing too much out of the norm, but it's not as... There's not like a center thread like you see in some modern storytelling where it's, oh, we're going to follow these characters and it's not as soap opera-y as some other modern series are. It's very much more like flavor of the week, vignette adventures, but our characters we follow along, we get to know them more as we go, which I really like. Like I said in the reaction, this episode reminded me a lot of the water ghoul in Modao Zushi. I kept thinking about it the entire time, especially when they were on the boats, and I kept expecting them to jump on their swords and fly in the air. If you've watched Modao Zushi, you will know what I'm talking about. But I think there's some interesting things to note with the story of Tahomaru in episode 10. One is I like the fact that the environment, there is some interesting things and interesting notes about the environment with how Daigo sees it and how Tahomaru sees it. Because Tahamaru, when he's up on the ledge and he overlooks it, felt very much like a, look, Simba, everything the light touches is our kingdom. It felt like one of those moments. But the way Tahamaru describes it, he's like, well, look at how lush the land is. Look at the rice paddies. Look at the fields. Like, this all used to be a desolate wasteland and people ate bark. And now look what my father's done to make this such a vital and fertile land. And he has such a proud, optimistic view of it. But what he doesn't know is that in order for him to get said that, and you would think that Tahamaru would maybe, but how would he know to put 2 and 2 together? Because it's like 16 years ago, the baby was born. Tahamaru says, before I was born, everything was shit. Like, you would think he'd start putting those 2 and 2 things together, but he knows not nearly what the audience knows. So it makes sense that he's not putting he's not connecting those strands together. But it's just so interesting how Tahamaru has such an optimistic view of what his father has done. And he's like, my dad's done all these great things to make our kingdom better. When we, the audience, know, no, he didn't do good things to make the kingdom better. He sacrificed his child to a bunch of demons and made a deal with the devil. That's what he did. And Tahamaru doesn't know that. And I don't know if Tahamaru will learn that throughout the series or how he's going to figure that out, if he ever figures it out. But the contrast of him dictating how great his dad is in that moment is contrasted at the beginning of the episode here, where Daigo's looking down and seeing that because Hyakkimaru is gaining himself back and taking away from the devils what was taken from him, it's starting to renege Daigo's promise that he was given from the devils, and they're starting to take all of that back, and everything's starting to fall downhill. Also, growing up with a family that farms, we didn't grow crops necessarily, but I am surrounded by people who do farm. And yeah, if you don't have water for 2 months, it's not good. 2 months of drought, especially in a land that is used to rain. Like if you're in the middle of a desert, then yeah, the plants in the ecosystem adapt to that desert, and the soil and the plants that grow there adapt, and the people that cultivate there know that. But these people are used to 16 years of lush, beautiful land, and they've grown crops that are reflective of that. And so now that they're not getting the rain that they need, it's starting to reflect and destroy. It could potentially destroy their entire way of life. I know my family, we raise livestock, and if you don't have rain for 2 months, your cows have nothing to eat. There is no grain. And the worst thing you can do is start feeding hay in the summer. That's not a good sign. So they're like, if the drought continues, it's going to affect the harvest. Yeah, you'll have to harvest early, and there won't be as much crop. It won't be good. And of course, Daigo knows all of this, but he can't talk about it, because how do you tell your entire people that, oh, hey, by the way, yeah, all of our good fortune is because of a deal I made with a bunch of demons. And then they say that Asakura clan is getting restless. I think it's important to note that Daigo's clan have pissed off a lot of people. It's not just the Sakurai clan that they've pissed off. Now it's the Asakura clan as well. Like, and I feel like this has to do with the fact that for all these years, Daigo's kind of gotten away with doing whatever he wants because he's had all this good luck. And now all that good luck is starting to fall back on him, and these other clans are noticing and taking advantage of it. They've been gathering quietly as an army at the border, and we need to take action before they start a war. So, of course, he has to go and check in with the local deity demons to see what's going on. And meanwhile, Tahamaru's like trying to figure out, what secrets are my father keeping from me? What is going on? I love Mutsu and Hyoga. I love them. Hyogo and Mutsu, I absolutely love them. They're his best friends. I'm worried about them because I feel like they are very much keeping him grounded and from becoming an evil person and from becoming a dark person like his father. Like, they're keeping him grounded in the humanity and light of the world, and this kind of like idealistic, but we're going to talk about it. It's not like idealistic. It's actually just being a nice person. Like, they're keeping him in line with that. And my fear is that something bad is going to happen to them, and he's going to kind of go the route of his dad. And I hope that doesn't happen, but as long as they're around, I fear that it's going to happen, and we'll talk about it as we go. And then him looking to his mom, who prays constantly to the headless goddess of mercy to keep her son safe. And if he would just sit down and talk with her and ask her what's going on. But then again, Daigo's told her she can't talk about it. And so I don't think it would do him much good to sit down and talk with her, but it sucks because that's really all they need to do. And because of Daigo, we can't have nice things. Meanwhile, speaking of Daigo, he goes to be like, it must be that baby that's causing all the problems. It's like, I like that he confronts it as, he says the baby. He doesn't say his son or that man. He doesn't want to acknowledge that his child has grown up. He doesn't want to acknowledge that it's even his child. He doesn't want to have that responsibility. I want to point out that I really like the way that the demons converse with him. It's almost like it's like a god or like a man holding a magnifying glass down on an ant to burn it, is what it reminds me of. It reminds me of the light from a magnifying glass, like in Toy Story, where they shine the light, Sid shines the light on the toy and it burns a hole in it. That's exactly what that reminds me of. But that little sliver of light shows Daigo what the child looks like, that it was a baby, then we see him as a young adult, as a kid, and then as a young adult. And that's what they get. And he's like, well, just as I thought. And I'm like, it's so tragic because he doesn't view, what's so heartbreaking to me is that Daigo has just seen that his firstborn son is alive. Like, he's alive and thriving as well as he can be. And Daigo doesn't think, oh my God, my son's alive, I could reconnect with him. No, he's like, oh, my son's alive, causing all this problem, and he probably hates me because I sacrificed him. And that he has to get rid of him. It's like, it's so tragic. I'm like, bitch, no. Meanwhile, they're roaming through, killing demons left and right. It doesn't seem like the crab demon or this demon that gets slaughtered where one of the main demons is still body parts from him, so. But we see Hyakimaru has healed. He's got his torso back and he's healed up. And his wounds are done, and Dororo's like, oh my god, your clothes are dirty now, so here we go. Gotta wash them in the river. So Hyakimaru has his body back, except for his one leg, his two arms, his eyes, and I'm presuming everything else is intact. When Dororo's like, what? I've been meaning to ask you about that. I had a really dirty thought that Dororo was going to ask about his penis, but that was going too far. Dororo's a kid. We have to be reasonable. So basically, I like that Dororo points out that, I'm going to get my mind out of the gutter now, of where they can go next, where people eat white rice, even all they want, even in times like these. We should go there next, make loads of money, and stuff ourselves silly. And he names all the stuff that you can eat, including the manju steamed buns. I like that that's what gets Hyakimaru's attention, is the manju. I'm waiting for Tahamaru to see that damn symbol that Hyakimaru has with him and to ask about it. That's what I'm waiting on. But we can't get there yet, can we? The amulet that's from his family. And the thing about it is, Hyakimaru doesn't have his eyesight to our knowledge yet, so he can't see the symbol that's on the pouch to begin with, so he wouldn't be able to identify it even if he wanted to. So Tahamaru would have to be the one to identify it. I think that it speaks volumes as well that this guy that they tried to use the truth serum on, that he almost tried to cut out, he tried to bite his own tongue off rather than speak about why he's looking for the baby. Because he knows Daigo would kill him if he told anybody. Or make him suffer a fate worse than death. You know, like you do. So I just, It is really hard because you want Tahamaru to know the truth. When Tahamaru was doing this face, he looks a lot like his dad. But I don't want him to become like his father. I just don't want that to happen. But he goes and confronts him about the baby. And Daigo gets mad and doesn't want to tell him anything about it and makes him go away saying it's none of his concern or business. And Daigo's like, how can you still be alive? So the part that concerns me is when Hyogo and Mutsu meet up with him. And for the record, let me say, when they tell him he's been there since he was a kid, for the record, little baby Tahamaru is actually insanely adorable. Insanely adorable. Like, so cute, right? I cannot get over how adorable baby Tahamaru is. Even with Daigo's hair and eyebrows, it still works. Still super cute. I did look up Mutsu's voice actress because I thought that they sounded like, kind of like Armin from Attack on Titan and also a character from Bungo Stray Dogs. But no, actually the voice actress for Mutsu has only been in number 6 that I've seen. She was just a random woman's voice in number 6. I'm guessing that Mutsu is a guy just voiced by a woman because they said brothers in the episode, saying like, we're your brothers forever. And a lot of times voice actresses will voice more effeminate sounding guys. So I don't know. But anyway, they've not been any major projects other than this and like number 6. But the part that worries me is that Tahamaru's like, oh, when I was a child, I must still seem like a child to my father. And that's why he's keeping secrets and won't take me to war. I worry about that line because to me, that makes it seem like Tahamaru believes that because he's still acting like a child and not acting like an adult, that's why his dad's keeping secrets from him, not because the secrets are so horrible you wouldn't tell anybody. So my fear is that, like, right now, Tahamaru is being a benevolent, leader of his people. He's offering to help slay the monsters and actually put in the work. He's helping the people. He's believing the people. Like, he's doing all these really good things, and it's not being idealistic. It's just being a just ruler, right? And my fear is that Daigo is going to make him think that doing these things that are good for his people and that are actually being a good person are weak or that they are bad. And so until he like hardens his heart and gets this more warrior mindset and is more like his dad won't think that he's an adult. And I'm like, that always frustrates me when people are like, oh, if you're a kind person, that makes you weak. And I'm like, no, that doesn't. That honestly makes you strong, because going the Daigo route is the weak route. It's the easy and cheap route. But actually doing what Tahomaru is doing is being strong and doing something that most people would shy away from or don't have the courage to do. And my fear is that Daigo, because Tahomaru loves his father so much and believes in his father so much, that he's going to believe his dad over what he finds out. He's not going to believe the truth. He's not going to believe the truth that his dad's a terrible person, because he believes so much in him and he looks up so much to him. And you can't blame Tahomaru for thinking that, because he's grown up his whole life believing his dad's this great person, and his dad has never given him any reason to doubt that. So it's going to suck when that all comes crashing down, is the problem. So, yep, that's a problem. And I don't like it. I just don't like where that leads me to think. He's like, I've never seen my dad look like that before, so the matter with the baby must mean that much to him. I'm like, I feel like him and Hyakimaru, they could work together so much, but at the same time, like, there's a part of me that wants him and Hyakimaru to, like, work together to stop Daigo, to, like, set the record straight. But here's the problem. Hyakimaru would probably want Daigo dead, as he is right now, right? And Tahomaru would never let that happen, because he loves his dad so much. And so it's like, butting heads, what are you going to do? Oh! Just set up this conflict. And the worst part is that I really like Tahomaru. He's a really good character. He's easily likable. He makes good decisions. He's a kind person. He's naive a little bit, and he can be a little stubborn, but so can Hyakimaru. But he believes the people. He offers to help them. He's like, well, of course, I'm your leader, and this is what we're supposed to do. And you can tell the soldiers are like, you know, your dad wouldn't do this, but they don't want to come out and say that because their dad's the leader. And Tahomaru was like, well, wouldn't my father do the same thing? Let's do this. And it's like, no, your dad wouldn't do the same thing. That's the thing. You don't know that, though, because you're not on the front lines. Like, everything about Daigo's troops have led us to believe that they're kind of, you know, terrible, and they're kind of awful in terms of their behavior. But Tahomaru wouldn't know that because he's never been on the front lines, and Daigo won't let him go. So I worry about Tahomaru being corrupted, right? And I feel like what would corrupt him would be losing either Mutsu or Hyogo. Because when Hyogo's like, well, we would follow you into the depths of hell, like, you know, Samwise Gamgee over here. I'm like, that doesn't bode well for your character. I don't like where that's headed. I thought that when that monster had Hyogo in his mouth, that he was going to eat Hyogo right as Hyakimaru came and saved and killed the crab. It was going to eat him at the same time. And I thought what was going to happen was Tahomaru was going to be like, no, save Hyogo. And Hyakimaru, who was like, I'm just here to kill the demon, wouldn't care. And then it would lead to Hyogo dying and Tahomaru having a beef with Hyakimaru. That's where I thought it was going. I'm glad that didn't happen. But in the same vein, I'm like... So one thing that's pleasantly surprised me about Tahomaru's character alongside Hyakimaru as his brother is, in so many narratives that I've watched and read, when you have siblings who seem to be like destined rivals or that are destined to be pitted against one another, it always feels like one of the brothers has the wrong idea or has some kind of sleaziness to them or some kind of like darkness to them, that in contrast to the light of the protagonist. So for example, in Attack on Titan, there's a character who has a brother, and those two characters are very different, and the brother comes across kind of as sleazy and dark and creepy in comparison to the main character, which I'm simplifying horrifically. Go watch Attack on Titan. But you kind of get the idea of why the brothers would be against each other, right? Here, the sad thing is that Tahomaru and Hyakimaru are very similar. They both fight for people. They both fight to destroy demons. They're both stubborn, but they both have a good heart. And they're actually a lot more alike than they seem, despite their different upbringings. And kind of like we talked about at the beginning of the episode, but they each can't see that. And that's so frustrating, Right? It's so frustrating, actually. So yeah, and then Tahamaru comes up with this great idea to be like he gets up there on the hill after he gives the big speech about his dad, saying that, because they talk about how they're like, well, we're here to protect you. So if we have to, when they said talking about the explosives and throwing them into the crab, I was like, just put the explosives on a string and throw them into the crab and blow it up. I guess they wanted to make sure that they blew up, but I'm like, you can't find a way to detonate that and not have yourselves there. And obviously Tahamaru doesn't want anything to happen to either of them. But when they were talking about sacrificing themselves, and Tahamaru was like, well, don't do that. And he gives a speech about his dad as he like has them hoist him up. It's funny because Tahamaru has been hoisted up by his dad on his shoulders. And then here he gets hoisted up as well. And he's like, I will defeat any measly monster with my own hands. And I'm like, are you going to view your brother as a measly monster and try to destroy him with your own two hands? You gonna try to do that? Is that what's gonna happen? Anyway, so he looks up, and okay, now you can see where he sees the little gap where he's like, we can trap the crab in the little moon area and get the water to get out, and then that'll make him easier to kill. Honestly, I love this entire plan. The whole setup and everything. This, again, we've talked about how this series replaces Berserk. This was a prime example of that, because all of the strategizing and figuring out how to corner the enemy and using the resources around you to do it, this felt like something the Band of the Hawk would do in Berserk. It feels exactly like that, and I thought that was such a cool little moment. I was like, oh yeah, this feels very Golden Age. I'm super excited about that. But yeah. And then they managed to get it done. They managed to get the crab separated. And I was just thinking, like, all that crab meat, y'all. I don't know if we'd be eating demon crab meat, but that's a lot of crab meat. You could actually get full on that one. Normally crab legs do not fill me up at all, but that one, that'll work. I hadn't even thought of the crab using the rocks to knock open the dam and get the water back in. And Tahamaru's pretty smart because he did the sword there to brace himself so he didn't get flung out by the rushing water. But the people there, I think it's important to see that they believe in Tahamaru, and they got to see him actually work and save them. So that was really important to see, and I think that worked really well. The rock throwing was kind of hilarious because I was like, what good does that do? But it was all to distract them as well, so it's fine. And then Hyogo manages to save all the people right as he's about to get swallowed up by the monster. I swear, though, they had an advertisement pop up right as Hyakimaru showed up. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Right as he's got two swords on his belt, right as he's about to get eaten by this crab, I was like, oh my god, is Hyogo gonna die? And then you see Hyakimaru just scramble by, and bloop, there he goes. And he runs over, takes his arm off, shoots. Also, the X that Hyakimaru makes when he cuts the crab kind of reminds me a little bit about the X on Daigo's head, you know? But yeah, and then Tahamaru does the finishing blow to kill the crab as well. I wonder if that's why he didn't get a power back, because Tahamaru helped kill the crab too? Interesting. But yeah, they managed to get them out there. Man, Mutsu worked fast to get Hyogo back into that boat. And then yeah, they both end up leaving right as they turn around, and Tahamaru, he sees Hyakimaru on top of the crab as he looks over there, and he says, who are you? And then Hyakimaru looks by him, and they see each other passing like ships in the night. But I bet he didn't see the symbol, which is so frustrating. So frustrating. And then Daigo, of course, is like, everything's falling apart. Everything's falling apart. Meanwhile, his wife is sitting there praying to the headless goddess of mercy for her son. If we could have nice things show, these two brothers could get along, and it could be really great. That would be awesome. Really would like if you do that, but I don't think that's going to happen. You're going to put us through the ringer first, and I don't like it. Anyway, this was a really good episode. And I'm sad that I like Tahamaru's character now, because it's just going to make it even more angsty, damn it. But you know what? We'll just have to wait and see. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts down below, but I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'm back next week with more of Dororo. Bye!